How's everybody doing? All right. I promise one of these years I'm going to not get up here and tell you a very depressing story. But what can I say? The circumstances are out of my control. This is probably the hardest speech I've ever given, in part because it's the hardest moment I've ever given a speech in. And I want to start, as I often do, with a personal story. So I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, in a mixed neighborhood. And I say mixed. I don't mean racially mixed, although it was that too. I say mixed because in our neighborhood, there were those who believed that the Civil War was over, and there were those neighbors who believed that it was not. They were believers in what is sometimes called the lost cause theory of the Civil War, that the Confederacy's war against the Union was an honorable battle over succession and states' rights, that Confederate generals were heroes, and that the Old South was an idyllic place, a great place. In their version of history, Confederates were the victims. A great harm had been done to their way of life. Other people, using the power of the federal government, had wrested it away from them. In this telling of the past wasn't just behind them as a memory. It was ahead of them as a vision, as a goal, as a dream. It was a place to be restored, a place that could be made again. I'm sure you see where this story is eventually going. There was one neighbor whose conviction in these beliefs is seared in my memory. His name was Gary. Gary was a Pontiac Firebird driving, gun-toting, honest-to-God son of the American Confederacy. Gary was a person who celebrated Robert E. Lee Day, a holiday commemorating the Confederate general in many southern states. It was chosen not by accident, by the way, to fall on the same day as Martin Luther King Day. Every year on that day, Gary would proudly fly the Confederate flag, two of them, one out of each window of the Firebird. A third hung year-round above his porch. Now, I could tell you stories about Gary for days. There are many of them. But one above all others sticks out. It happened when I was just 10 years old. That day, I was walking and eating an apple in the hot Memphis sun. And I passed in front of Gary's house, which was right next to ours. As I finished eating, I flung the apple core into his bushes. And as the apple arced, Gary walked right around the corner. But I had misjudged the distance. And instead of landing in the bushes, the apple flew over them and landed on his porch. The core bounced on the concrete and then ricocheted off glass as it hit his door. I held my breath. Gary screamed, "You little shit!" He jumped off the porch, and in 2 bounds, he was on me. He wrapped his hands around my neck, he lifted me off the ground, and he shook me. The world went blurry as I hung there, legs kicking in the air. I soiled myself. Urine dripped all the way down my leg. In the end, I think it was only the fear that I would pee on him that caused Gary to drop me. My legs were moving before I hit the ground. I ran as fast as I could. I bypassed the front door of the house for fear he would catch me in that amount of time. I burst through the back screen door crying. Now, that assault that Gary had perpetrated against me was an expression of power. All physical violence is an expression of power. I want to, for a moment, take you on a short journey through history. And that's going to end right back where I left you a moment ago with Gary and Jesse hanging in the air. Keep that image in your mind, though, because I'm coming right back to it. I want to take you all the way back to 1776. Not because that's the year of our nation's birth, but because it's the year Adam Smith published The Wealth of Nations, his defining work on capitalism. Now, I'm sure you're about to be riveted. If you've read the 500 or so pages of his book, you know that, well, it's a real snoozer. It also revolutionized the way the world thought about the economy. If you haven't read it, don't worry, I'm going to summarize the entirety of Adam's work in about 90 seconds. Here are the essential concepts. Adam Smith argued that a nation's wealth was best fostered through free markets and limited government intervention in the economy. He believed that individual participants in a market economy, each pursuing self-interest, would produce benefits to each other. In that way, he believed that the government did not need to intervene to assure a particular outcome, that the so-called invisible hand of the market would guide those outcomes in a way that ultimately produced the most benefit for society as a whole. Central to this theory is the individual market transaction. You see, Adam Smith posited that people would only transact when it was in their self-interest to do so, that a seller would normally not sell a good for less than what it costs them to produce, and that a buyer would not pay more for a good than the utility that it provided to them. In this way, buyer and seller would reach a price that produced mutual benefit to each other. And multiplied by 1,000, 1,000,000, billions, and trillions of transactions, that mutual benefit would create broad-scale social benefit. In Adam Smith's view, it would produce what he called natural liberty, the freedom to pursue one's own interest. Smith's view was in contrast to the dominant worldview, the dominant economic theory of the time. That was the theory of mercantilism. Mercantilism was different. It featured significant government intervention in the economy, including state-run industries and government-granted monopolies. Mercantilism was concerned with the balance of trade and often featured the heavy use of tariffs to control national trade as a zero-sum game. Now, Adam Smith's theory was brilliant, but terribly flawed. Indeed, there are a great many problems with Adam Smith's theory, but the biggest one is how he ignored the effects of power on market transactions. Put simply, his model assumed that the two parties in a transaction each had equal information about the transaction, perfect information on both sides. In essence, he assumed a level playing field. He assumed that each party came to the transaction with equal power. And in having equal power, they would produce mutual benefit for each other. He didn't envision a transaction in which all of the power sat on one side and not the other. But that was never true. It wasn't true then, and it's not true now. Indeed, Adam Smith's vision of a free market never existed and has never existed because the balance of power has never been equal. In the decades that followed Smith's treatise, the transatlantic slave trade reached its peak. For hundreds of years, African peoples had the fruits of their labor stolen from them in the form of slavery. They were subjects of transactions, not the beneficiary of them. Around the world, including in this country, the forces of imperialism captured land, subjugated indigenous peoples, and extracted resources. Sacred lands that had only ever been free, ripped apart and harvested and poisoned, so that those with more power could benefit. And just as those empires projected force across oceans and continents, their greed projected force across time, flung its power forward to oppress the future, to always feel that they had control, not just over their neighbors, but their grandchildren's neighbors. Wealth inequality grew, and with it, the inequality of power became more entrenched. The balance within market transactions became more and more lopsided, not less. As we move forward in history, when the owning of people as property became illegal in this country, new methods of controlling people and property arose. We know these as Jim Crow, redlining, mass incarceration, predatory inclusion, zoning laws. The expression of power over people in the economy never disappeared. It only became more subtle, below the surface. At times, we had cause to believe that we were making real progress, and indeed, real progress has been made. Until today. What does all this have to do with the current moment? Come back to that image of little Jesse hanging in the air with Gary's hands around his neck, legs kicking in the wind. That's all of us right now. The billionaires have their hands around our necks. They've taken control of our government, and they are not letting go. Not unless we do something. They have resurrected that story. They've resurrected that story of the lost cause, the myth of the antebellum South. They have modernized it, stripped it of its geographic specificity, and applied it to the whole country. The narrative is remarkably similar to the lies told about the Old South. It's a story that says that some other group of people have prevented the progression of the idyllic past into the future. It's a vision of the future that says if we could just go back to this mythical, magical past that never was, we could move forward into a greater future, a great America. They have leaned into and embraced an economic theory that is all about the expression of power. It bears more resemblance to mercantilism than it does to the type of free market capitalism that Adam Smith envisioned. Indeed, there are a great many labels that could be applied to the current economic theory that we see expressed today. Trickle-up economics, crony capitalism, oligarchy. Here's what I call it. It's government of the billionaires, by the billionaires, and for the billionaires. Its defining feature is not free markets or any notion of liberty and freedom at all. Its defining feature is the wielding of power, not to do good, not to produce benefits for society, not for the expansion of liberty and freedom, but for its constriction, for the benefits of the narrowly defined few. Indeed, This economic theory is all about picking winners and losers in thinly veiled attacks against people of color. They have demonized DEI. While claiming to fight for a meritocracy, they have filled our government with the least qualified group of people we have ever seen. Where constitutional rights are not promised, they have gone even further, attacking our nation's immigrants. They see a tattoo in honor of someone's mother, insist it's a gang sign, and throw those innocents into prison camps in countries where they've never even lived, while they brag about it on social media. They have decided that federal workers and nonprofits are enemies of the state. They've taken a chainsaw to the ecosystem that was built to serve the people, gutting budgets to the detriments of Americans who rely on them, eyeing up agencies like the CFPB that seek to balance the power in market transactions and protect our wallets from scammers and swindlers, aiming their fire at the CDFI fund and who knows what else. Elon Musk's Doge might as well be called the Department of Government Extraction. They are cutting benefits and services for millions of Americans. They threaten to cut Social Security, Medicaid, and Medicare, the bedrock of the American safety net. They do this not for our benefit, but for what? So they can award new billion-dollar contracts to themselves and to their friends? So they can deliver tax cuts to the wealthiest Americans? And our banking and corporate friends cannot rest any easier. A defining feature of mercantilism was the granting of government-sponsored monopolies. Charters were granted only to those aligned with the king. Banks cannot assume a deregulatory agenda that solely benefits them. More likely is the kind of government intervention in the economy that puts a thumb on the scale for the chosen few, for the crypto agenda, for the Elon Musk agenda, for the billionaires who are profiting off of our government. So what is to be done? I promise the speech becomes more uplifting from here. Or at least I planned it that way. I read it again. I was like, you're kind of dipping back into negativism, Jesse, you know. People need a call to action. I'm sure you've all had that nightmare, which was my reality. You know the one. Someone attacks you and you can't scream. Gary had his hands around my neck. You're running away, but the person is catching up to you. Or even worse, your legs don't work and you can't run. We're in that nightmare right now, but we have to get our legs moving. We've got to do whatever we can to get those billionaires' hands off our necks. Take a lesson from little Jesse. Do whatever it takes. Be on their legs if you have to. I hear that might work. Look, nightmares are about inaction, about feeling powerless. There's a reason Dr. King wrote a speech about a dream rather than a nightmare. Dreams are inspiring. Dreams provoke action. Dreams are empowering. We're in a moment where we have to return to a movement mentality. And to do that, we have to dream bigger. Our dreams have to aim at the right goals. For a long time, we have aimed for the mitigation of inequality, not the elimination of it. But it's clear to me that the wealth inequality that we have is unsustainable, that the incredible concentration of power in the hands of the few is subverting our democracy and undermining our freedom. A free market economy of the type that Adam Smith envisioned won't work and cannot become a reality unless there's a balancing of powers. To put it simply, free markets can't be free unless people are free. Now, I don't know about you, but freedom doesn't look like people can't disagree with the president for fear of retribution. Freedom doesn't look like fear. Freedom doesn't look like the current moment at all. Our dreams fundamentally have to aim at building power and to wield it responsibly. The forces that we see know how to do this. We have to use it to ensure true liberty. You see, racial equity, diversity, equity, and inclusion was never about putting a thumb on the scale for one group of people over another. It was about taking the thumb off the scale. It's about balancing out the power, the violence that has been expressed through our economic system against people of color. And our dreams have to inspire others. It's not enough to be right. We need to build a bigger tent. We have to realize that many people feel harmed by the economy that we have, and that they are not our enemies, even if they might think that we are theirs. Years ago, I forgave Gary. In my head, we don't talk. In preparation for this speech, I thought about giving him a call, but I looked on his profile page, and he still defines himself as a Confederate, and so I thought, well, you know, maybe I'll just let that one be. I'm sure he doesn't remember it, you know. Kind of an important story in my life, but you know, I didn't look back once when I ran away from Gary. I didn't see what expression was on his face as he watched me go. But I've reflected on that moment for many years, and I've always felt sorry for him. Because after attacking a child to feel strong, Gary was headed back to a life where he felt like a victim, a life where he didn't feel in control very often. Now, I want to be clear, Gary was not a good person. Gary did bad things. Gary committed violence against a child, and he could have, and perhaps should have, gone to prison, but for the unwavering belief in grace and redemption that my parents held. But Gary was a symptom and not a cause. Gary lashed out with violence in an attempt to control a life over which he felt very little control. I doubt very much that Gary believes that his life turned out the way that he wanted it to. And I know that because I looked at his profile page and how his career has progressed, and I don't know. You know? I don't know. But listen, we have to keep our eyes on the prize. We know who is to blame, and it is not a large group of people. It is not the majority of Americans. Now listen, I don't stand before you with all of the answers. The beauty of NCRC is all of you. It's the collective intelligence. It's the collective power of the group. It's the connections that get made, the relationships that are built here in this room, at the conference, as we fight for a just economy together. And when I look around this room, I see a room full of lions. You can puff your chests out with pride. You've done great things. You have fought for liberty and justice for all, each and every one of you. Many of you have dedicated your lives to making this world a better place. But here's a thing that might be tough to hear. Sometimes this room full of lions acts more like a cage full of kittens. We've become domesticated. We've forgotten that a tax status is not a movement. In short, we've forgotten how to roar. See, the movement for civil rights and economic justice was never about making it simpler for folks to do easy things. Click here, donate $5, come to our event, tell people what you believe in endlessly online. You've all seen it. You all get these emails. The movement for civil rights and economic justice was always about building support for people to do the hard things that are required when you want to make change. Good men and women are easy to find. Look all around you, at every table in this room. But courage is a thing that is in much shorter supply. Not every person can raise their voice. Not every person can run towards danger. Not every person can speak their dreams without fear of reprisal. But we can support each other to do hard things. Those of us who can, must. The life that you save may even be your own. So I'm here to ask you something. I want you to let them hear you roar. That's your cue for something that's about to come. No. Peter understood the instruction. He knew the assignment. But we're gearing up for it, all right? Whether you need to be a lion or just, make some noise. From here to the White House, to the halls of Congress and the benches of the Supreme Court, in every city and town, in every forum, let them hear the patter of your feet. Let them see the power of your dreams. Tell them to get their hands off the programs and services that benefit millions of Americans. Nobody else is going to save us. We're the only ones coming, and it's not going to be easy. So do it together now. Let them hear you roar. Thank you.